Welcome everybody to another video. If you saw my last video, you saw me turn this sad state of affairs into this beautiful dresser. This was a ton of work. There were so many issues with the finish and there was a horrible cigarette smell I had to deal with. If you follow my Instagram, you know that I actually got two dressers that day. In this video, we're going to be working on the second dresser, which is this mid-century piece you see here. I'm going to be stripping this paint off and dealing with the cigarette smell. Wish me luck, I am going to need it. My name is Angie, and I'm the one behind Transcend Furniture Gallery, a business created from the love of vintage furniture and the desire to take broken, dated, and unloved things and turn them into modern treasures. Sometimes I paint, and sometimes I don't, but I always do what I can to save old pieces from the trash. Welcome to my workroom. First things first, let's take this piece outside. Yes, I can lift this. I'm not a small human. This part was actually filmed the same day that I worked on the other piece, so you'll see the drawers from the other piece as well mixed in. I decided to clean them both at the same time as it was a super beautiful sunny day and would allow these pieces to dry after cleaning. First thing I have to do is try to scrub off as much of the nicotine and cigarette yuckiness as I can. Both of these pieces just reeked of cigarette smoke, but even just doing the cleaning made a huge difference, but you'll see I'm going to do other things to tackle the smell as well. After a good cleaning with a bleach cleaner, I'm just letting these dry out in the sun. Okay, YouTube time warp now. It is now a week later and this piece has been sitting over here while I worked on the other piece and a few other pieces in between. Now it's time to get to this piece. I'm using my favorite circa 1850 stripper here. It worked so well on this thick paint. There's actually multiple layers of paint just like the other piece, and this stripper, it is strong. You can see that I have my garage door open right over there. I'm literally 6 feet away from it, so it's well ventilated, which is very important when working with this stripper. I'm stripping this middle bar here. It actually fits on the front of the dresser in between the legs. I don't know if I want to keep it yet, but I'm gonna have it ready just in case. This is interesting because as I'm putting the stripper on the drawers, immediately you can see the discoloration from the years and years of smoke buildup on this poor dresser. And you can see here on this piece just how gross that actually is. I'm so happy to be stripping this off. This white latex paint is so sticky and gross. If you guys could see my face right now as I'm stripping this off, you would see the biggest smile ever. I knew it was going to be walnut. I've done enough of these dressers to know what type of wood is typically used here, but I didn't expect to find it in such good condition. It was just drawer after drawer of beautiful walnut veneer. Now, I'm generally not one to judge someone for how they want to treat or refinish their own furniture. That's totally fine, but I don't know what happened to this poor dresser to deserve this. But I'm gonna do what I can to make it right. I still have no idea what condition the top is in. I'm a little bit scared, but we'll see in a few minutes. In the meantime, I am going to strip all this off. I've pretty much already decided that it's going to be at least partial paint, and the main reason for that is these areas here, the braces and the trim in the front, it is solid wood, but there's no walnut veneer on the front of it, so even if I stained it, it would be a slightly different color than the rest of the walnut, and while some people don't mind the two-tone look, including myself, it's not really what I want for this piece. The manufacturers who make these pieces initially, they use what's called a toner, and basically it turns all of the wood the same color. So even though you've got walnut veneer in some parts and a completely different type of wood in other parts, when they use this toner it makes it all the same color. What I really like about this stripper, this particular version, is that it's a gel version, so it tends to cling to vertical surfaces a lot better than the super runny stuff. I also find it doesn't dry out quite as quickly as the super runny stuff, so even though it's a few more bucks, I usually try to get this kind when I can. So far so good with this top. I haven't seen any craziness yet. I'm very hopeful here that I'm going to be able to use this top. Okay, so now that the body is all stripped off, I'm going to be tackling these legs. They're a little bit loose from the main part here, so I'm going to undo the screw. I'm pretty sure I'm going to find a dowel here that just needs a little bit of TLC. Or should I say TFG? See what I did there? I'm a weirdo, don't mind me. Okay, there's my dowel. I'm going to pull the other one off here and then clean up the joints. I want to make sure there's no old dried up glue there because the new glue is not going to stick to it. And another good thing about taking this apart is it's going to give me easy access to completely sand off these legs. You can see Mr. DeWalt is very happy to be helping me out today. I love his little smiley face, it's my absolute favorite. One thing I like to do when I'm sanding off legs is do just a little bit here on the edge. It keeps them from chipping over the years and just gives it a nice finished look. So I've already sanded down this joint here. I'm just adding a small bit of wood glue. I don't want to completely overload the joint. I just want enough to make sure this is going to stay nice and tight, yet still be able to be taken apart if need be down the road. So these wood handles basically sit on top of the drawer face. Someone here has attempted a repair in the past, not a very good one. They used, it looks like silicone actually instead of wood glue to try to put this on, and they didn't pull the staple out or even attempt to put it back in the same hole. So the fact that the staple was folded over like that meant that the handle didn't sit flush against the drawer face. So I'm scraping off all the old silicone. I've pried out the staple and they should now fit in the original holes. Once I'm sure that everything's going to line up well, I'm going to add some glue, just a small bit, and I'm going to skip over the holes because I want to be able to have a good view of them when I'm putting this back together. And I'm also going to add just a tiny bit on here as well, just so that I'm sure that it's going to adhere well. And I'm just carefully lining them up here, making sure that the staples are going to fit in the original holes. So far so good. And a little love tap with the tack hammer here. And that should do it. I'm going to clamp this in a few spots just to make sure that it stays tight while the glue dries, but this handle is now good to go. Finally getting into the fun stuff. I really love sanding. There's always so much prep work with these pieces, especially if you're dealing with issues and doing repairs. Sometimes it feels like it's, well, it literally is hours and hours, sometimes days before you get to the fun stuff. Speaking of fun stuff, thank you again to these awesome folks who bought me more teas. This is the best thing ever. It's a great way to help support the channel and I really appreciate it, and it's fun. It's really fun getting to know some of you guys. If you're wondering what all this tea nonsense is, you can take a peek in the description box. I put a link down below there for you. Okay, back to work. This is actually a 150 grit sand pad. I could use something a little bit coarser, but because these drawer fronts are veneer, I don't want to risk sanding through. The handles are solid wood, but I'm just using the 150 all around. It's cutting through just fine. There's no need to really go any coarser. Not in a rush. It's veneer repair, and refinishing is not something you ever want to try to rush through. The reason for that is not just your own result, because I mean that's important as well, but I feel like we kind of have a responsibility to help this piece survive for years and years to come. And with veneer, you usually only get 1 or 2 cracks at refinishing it. So if you're blasting through a finish because you're in a rush or don't feel like taking your time, you may end up with a great result, but what it's going to do is inhibit someone from refinishing it down the road, and to me that's not okay. I usually try to avoid that wherever possible. I want to make sure that if someone decides they want to do something to this dresser in another 40 years that they're still able to do it. So that's just my 2 cents. Yeah. So the reason it seems like I'm taking forever to sand this one drawer is because I'm sanding all of the surfaces. When you're dealing with any kind of odor, whether it's musty smell or cigarette smell, one of the best ways after cleaning to get rid of the odor is to remove a layer and then reseal the piece. This drawer's dovetails were coming a little bit loose, so I'm just adding a tiny bit of glue in each little section here, and I'm going to clamp it back down. You don't want to completely saturate the joint with wood glue because there may come a point where this needs to be taken apart, and if it's completely loaded up with glue, there's a higher likelihood that it's going to break if you try to separate it. It's just kind of another example of taking care in what you're doing and ensuring that this piece will be usable down the road. I can't reach this with the orbital, so I'm doing a little bit of hand sanding just to remove that last bit of paint from the handle there. And these are my drawers now. They're all completely sanded. Everything's ready to be stained, sealed. Super happy with how this is coming. I know this is a bit of a longer video. Thanks to everyone for watching and sticking with me so far. I find editing these hard sometimes because you want to try to cut out as much of the fluff as possible so that people don't lose interest, but at the same time, these are all very important steps. The struggle is real, people. These 2 sections here, there were holes in the veneer, and when they painted it, the paint settled into these holes. So the only way I can fix these is to kind of gouge out the remaining bits of paint, and then I'm going to use some walnut wood filler in these holes in the hopes that I can disguise them enough. This is LePage walnut wood filler. It's one of my favorites. It usually stains up pretty well. There's also a little bead of paint along the back edge here, so I'm just using a blade to scrape that off. Now I'm picturing this piece in a darker green. This is pressed fern. It is a really nice green, but I want something a little bit darker, so I'm actually mixing coal black into it. It's not a precise recipe. I've never mixed these 2 colors together before, but I'm gonna see how it goes here. These lids are notorious for sticking. That little silicone round circle thing that I had, those are great for helping to get the lids off without killing your hand. If you're interested in that, I'll pop a link down in the description below, as well as some of the other products that I'm using. Just giving this a stir. It's looking kind of like what I was picturing, but the paint is always a little bit lighter when it's wet, so I'm gonna have to apply a first coat and just see how this dries up. It might still be a bit light, but we're gonna give it a try. I want a dark green, but I don't want like 80s and 90s hunter green, if that makes sense. So I can pretty much already tell as I'm doing this that even though it's going to dry a little bit darker, it's still not quite as dark as I want. So once I get this first coat on, I'm going to mix up a little more black into the green that I just mixed, and we should have it pretty much perfect for the second coat. This is General Finishes Gel Stain in the color Candlelight. I was hoping to use Nutmeg, which is just a slightly different tone, but I didn't have enough. I wouldn't have had enough to do all of the drawers in the top, so I went with Candlelight. It was kind of the next best thing. It's a little bit redder than Nutmeg, but I think it's still going to look great, especially when I get that green just a bit darker. I'm so excited for how this is coming along, you guys. I applied the gel stain first to the handles, which are solid wood and a little bit lighter than the walnut veneer on the front, just so that it would have a little bit more time to soak in. They are going to be slightly different tones anyway, but I was just trying to minimize that a little bit. I'm doing my second sanding here on the top. This is now a 220 grit. This is the last grit that I'm going to be using before staining, and I forgot to mention I did the same thing on the drawers. And also just sanding through my little patch job there, just making sure it's nice and smooth. And now I can take a good look here. So there's a few little areas of damage. I don't think anything is overly serious. The stain should pretty much cover most of these issues. This is an oil-based stain. I really love the gel stains. They just kind of sit on the surface. They don't soak in as much, and I don't know, I just find them really easy to work with. Just wiping off the excess stain now. You can see here now that the color is dry, and it is definitely a little bit lighter than I want, so here I'm going to add a little bit more coal black, give it a stir, shake it up, and we're going to try again. This is a great view showing how light the color is when it's wet, but this is going to dry a lot darker, and I'm really happy with this color now. We're closing in on being done. I'm going to put these legs back on. They're super easy to put on. I don't know, I think I'm going to leave this piece off. It doesn't serve a purpose structurally, and I think it's going to look cleaner and neater without it. The stain has now had plenty of time to dry. I am applying a water-based finish over top of an oil-based finish, so you can do it, you just need to make sure that your base layer is completely dry. You want to get in and get out with this polycrylic, you don't want to overwork it, so I'm just putting it on, wiping it off, and moving on. If you miss a spot, just wait and get it on the next coat. This is the same clear odor killing primer that I used on the other piece. It paints on white. You can either roll it or paint it on with a brush, but it dries completely clear and it just helps seal the wood and seal in any residual odors. There's actually not much left. I'm quite surprised after cleaning and sanding this piece. There's very few traces of the smell left, but I decided to prime it anyway just in case. This top is looking absolutely beautiful. This is my first coat of polycrylic. I'm actually going to do 3 coats on this. I had to purchase a new back for this, so I just went to the hardware store and picked up a big sheet of, some people call it hardboard, it is technically called masonite, but I had them rip it down to the size, just popping out the rest of these staples in preparation. Wow, okay, it's almost reveal time. I'm just adding the backer board here, and let's have a look at what this piece looks like now.